This is an interview with Ramon Kubitschek. He is a longtime Subud member, has served as regional, national helper, and is a very prolific artist. Ramon, can you start by just saying how you found and came into Subud?
Sure. There are many, that would be like a long story, but I'll give you the short story. And then if you want me to say more, I can say more. But um, I didn't, I was always interested in the spiritual path. And then I read a book on the Gurdjieff work, Uspensky Gurdjieff work. So I happened to be in England and I found an Uspensky Gurdjieff group. I was there for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, it was fine, but not really what I was looking for. And then I happened to read Bennett's autobiography, where he talked about the coming of Subud and how Gurdjieff told him that, that was going to be something special, much greater. I mean, Gurdjieff said much greater than he was, and so forth. So I was very intrigued, but I imagine this might be really highly secret. And I was living in Bristol at the time, and I I saw that there was a jumble sale, and it was at Subud Hall. So I went to it, and yes, lo and behold, it was the Subud that I had been intrigued by, and I immediately went and started the applicancy period, and that was that. Although that too was filled with very strange stories. My applicancy period, my
So,
whole early.
so tell us one of those strange stories then.
Okay. Well, when I was an applicant, there was one other fellow there. And it used to be, I don't know if they still do it, but it used to be that you would wait for 3 months and then they would test to see if you were ready to be opened. Well, he had failed, whatever that means, his applicancy period. So he was there. The helper would come and say, okay, shall we start with a quiet period? And he closed his eyes and promptly fell asleep. So then this other applicant would start talking to me and filling me in. You probably want to know this and that and so forth. And after about, half an hour of talking this way, the helper would wake up and say, any questions? And so this is what happened for a while. And after my 3 months, I was opened, but the person who opened to me literally quit Subud the next day. I tried not to take it personally. That was
Don't take the blame for that, huh?
right. Well, apparently he had just gotten married, and his wife was in Baha'i, and she said he was, he had to choose, make a choice between her or Subud. So he made a choice, and I won't comment on whether it was the right choice or not.
Yeah. He never came back to Subud as far as
Never
you.
came back to Subud, and there were lots of stories in the first few months, and I when I think back, I said, like, why did I stay in? And I think these days, often people, they might have some kind of a little disagreement, and they immediately quit Subud. Um, but I was so motivated by um, what I thought Subud could bring me that I just thought that all of whatever the craziness that I witnessed was just a test.
Yeah.
And so forth. So I went through with it. But in those days, I guess we all felt that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how was your first Latihan? Were you able to feel something?
Well, it was very quiet, actually. Very quiet. I didn't start singing or dancing or anything like that. I just felt um, the energy in my hands and then afterwards in my body. And that was that. But I remember walking home, my entire body kind of humming and feeling alive.
Hmm.
And that was, and for the first little while, that's what it was. It wasn't anything dynamic. So
Yeah.
it took a while for that to happen. But in those days, so we'll tell you more crazy stories here. So people would come to the hall and they say, "Oh my God, on the way here, there was this giant jinn, an angel in the road, like must have been 100 feet high. And then they saw me and immediately said, that's not important. None of this is important. You just concentrate on your laddie hand. Anyway, that angel was totally amazing. So lots of people were into seeing angels and jinns, it was the topic. And I didn't see any of those, but anyway, so it was.
Yeah, I didn't see any angels in the beginning either. So you've been in Subud since, did you say 1972?
Yeah, I don't want to add how much it is because then I get, oh my God. And this is the only place where I'm at. Oh well. It's now acceptance. Yeah. This is where it is.
Well, I've been in Subud since 63, so I'm your elder.
Okay. So you have all the answers then.
Oh yeah, yeah. So have you been to some of the world congresses and seen or had anything to do?
Not many. Disappointingly, I wasn't able to go to many, but the first World Congress I was able to go to was in Toronto. And then I was able to go to Spokane and also Anugraha, and I'm leaving one out, Freiburg just recently. So I've been to a few, but not many.
Okay.
I missed out. And I love, the idea of traveling someplace where I could meet my Subud brothers and sisters and all that kind of stuff. Very exciting to me, but I just could not pull it off.
Yeah. So have you had any kind of experiences related to BAPAC?
Well, all I've got, every time you ask me a question, all I can think of is the kind of crazy stuff that's happened to me. Yeah. So when BAPAC came to Vancouver, he came to Vancouver once and he gave a talk at our Subud Hall. And during that period, at one point, I remember going into I had a dream where I was entering the men's bathroom in the Subud Hall.
Say that again, I didn't quite know.
Entering the men's bathroom at the Subud Hall. I had a dream of that. And when I turned around to walk out, BAPAC was blocking the door. He wasn't letting me out. And then he suddenly turned and with tremendous force punched me in the stomach. Didn't embrace me, just punched me in the stomach.
A force punched you in the stomach.
Yeah, punched me in the stomach. And I woke up with this pain in my stomach. But anyway, nothing more than that. But I sort of felt a bit affronted. I said, geez, people often talk about having experiences of BAPAC, the love pouring from him, and he punches me in the stomach. That's my BAPAC story. So it's okay. I wasn't aggrieved. It was just.
And did you learn anything from that experience?
No. I mean, I've had a lot of strange experience. Not strange, like when people say strange, just unusual experiences on a minor level, but lots and lots of them, And I remember once when I lived in England for over 5 years, because that's where I was open in Subud. And I was going through a tough patch. And in those days, I was giving wine tastings. It was a kind of a Subud enterprise working with Emmanuel Elliott. And when things were hard, I remember standing on the sidewalk, about to enter the premises where I was going to give the wine tastings. And suddenly, just like that, spontaneously, the lenses in my glasses just popped out and shattered on the sidewalk in front of me. So I was just standing there with just frames, no lenses. And there was nobody, no one bumped into me. There was no force. That was it. And I said, oh my God, why, please? Anyway, I went ahead with what I was doing. But there are lots of those kinds of things that happened to me. Yeah. So I found, a lot of experiences and a lot of learning came to me from things not working out, not from things working out, but the opposite.
So
You know,
things happening to you that did not work out, is that what you're saying?
yes. So, for example, remember the days of talent testing?
Yeah.
So I thought I had a full-time job. I was teaching at a college, and it was fine. I was, I was a young dad, and things were okay. But I thought I was never quite satisfied. So I decided, why not? I'll do this talent testing. And I had these two helpers who had been spent many years in Subud, and they suddenly received that medicine healing. No, that I had a enormous. That's the word they use. An enormous capacity for healing. In fact, and then maybe medicine would be, and they just went into ecstasy. Meanwhile, I was just, yeah, it's okay. I was just standing there, but they were like, oh my God, I thought they might have to lie down afterwards or so. I was so ecstatic for them. Anyway, it was determined that maybe I should explore that. So I actually did. Even though I had no money saved up, I sort of did various things. And I went and did, I was in my early 30s. I had no science background. So I said, so without quitting, I could not afford to quit my job. So I shifted all my teaching to evenings. And during the day, I did full-time pre-med, and then in the evenings I taught. And then in the nights I did homework. So I basically had like this much sleep, very little sleep at all. And it was a crazy time period. But I thought, this is what I'm supposed to do. Anyway, it did not work out. And, I got some decent grades, but to get into medical school, you have to get straight A's. And I was not going to get straight A's with 2 hours sleep a night and a full-time job and everything else. So I felt that like I was a huge disappointment. And so that was just before Anugraha. I wrote to Bapak about that. And I said, it's almost like I wrote apologetically, this is what happens, but, is there some other thing I should explore that's connected to medicine or healing? And I got this beautiful letter back saying not to take it too literally, and that it was my real talent was I've forgotten. It's obviously not memory. Well, it was discovering new approaches to things. Okay. And this could be applied in many different ways, including, healing, but because my thing was art and writing and so forth, that it could be applied in that too. But that's really was what it was, discovering new approaches to things. And it was showing how that could be. And I thought back to the year that I'd spent, and what I came to was that the important thing about it was that I had been put to the limit of what might call my competence. I was willing to explore, areas of my weakness and so forth, and that's what was more important than actually succeeding at pre-med, and that it was a kind of spiritual test. So it was spiritual training.
Yeah.
I was all in for that. I said, okay, fine. It was my spiritual training. I didn't go to some spiritual master or so forth. Instead, I was sent to do pre-med and so forth. And I had a lot of experiences like that, that I was shown, oh, this is going to change your life. And then it was taken away from me. Like, for instance, I did testing in Spokane at the Congress that Australia, I was thinking maybe I should move to some other country because just things were not working out. And for some reason, Australia came up, and it was ecstatic. There were even a couple of international helpers in on the testing. And it was wonderful if I went there. And so I got really, when I get shown something, I just dive in, I was even just like that, ready to emigrate. So I started looking for jobs and all kinds of stuff, and trying to meet people who are Australian and getting in touch with groups and everything else. And then I got really sick. I mean, really sick. I was only given a 30% chance of survival. So that was obviously, I'm still here. So, but that was obviously off the table. So what was that about? I have no idea. And when I got better, I didn't try to go to Australia. It was like just something that I had to go through, and that was that.
Yeah.
And lots of things like that. And so I've always tried not to take them literally.
Yeah.
Right. That's, I think, what's important. And so for me, I think spiritual. I realized the other day that ever since I was 18, I've been involved in spiritual work. Even first some Gurdjieff and then Subud. So I don't know what it's like not to have a spiritual orientation. I may not be, as good or as advanced or as sincere or whatever as I would like to be, but still, it was the dominant influence in my life.
Yeah.
So then that clearly, I tried to follow that. And it was the same with when I was doing art. My life circumstances were difficult. And so I couldn't always do art. Then I switched to writing. I did writing for a while because it's easier to do, physically speaking, it's easier to do writing. You don't have to set up. You can just, you write on a pad, or you can have a little laptop computer and just write on that. Whereas if you're creating art, the setup and the cleanup takes ages.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of, but even that was hard to do, hard to pull off sometimes. So there were lots of things I had to go through around that, and at some point I had to give it up. And but I realized that for me, art was also a form of spiritual exploration, in some sense. I tried to make it. I wasn't like, I'm not one of these people who says, oh, I'm going to do it so that I'm painting guided by the Ladihan, or I'm painting or making art as a Subud artist. I don't believe in that. I mean, yes, I support Subud art, but I don't believe in making distinctions. So if you're doing your Ladihan enough, then it becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
So when it's a part of me. I don't know. I don't think about, am I doing this as a spiritual? I never want to think. It's almost embarrassing to say it, right? And I remember supposedly a story attributed to Siddhartha when someone asked him whether he did a lot of testing, and he said no, because it interferes with his receiving.
So how did you get started in your artwork?
Well, I was always, I mean, from a very early age, I was always involved in not necessarily. I mean, sure, there was some drawings and so forth, but often it was would be creating things, like making stuff. Like I would make. It sounds odd and it may sound a little crazy, but I would make little nests that I put into trees, or I write a story and put it into the nest and put it into the trees, and make things for butterflies and bees and so forth. And then did some drawings. I was always sketching. I was always writing stories. By the age of 14, I knew that I would either be an writer or an artist, professional, not a Sunday painter, so to speak, a professional. That would be it. And that was it really is it's the way I looked at the world, So I looked at the world in a way that I guess we would say you look at it from your inner, but again, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I could explain, you know, I mean, I do know what it means, but it's having to explain one's intuitive grasp of the world, you know. So that's what I did, and I went and I studied at in Montreal, and then afterwards I studied in England, and you know, my life kept going through changes, and then we ended up moving to Vancouver. So for about 25 years or more, I lived in Vancouver, and I ended up teaching too much. So as a result of teaching too much, that was because life is so expensive, right? And so instead of devoting time to making art, I was teaching, first of all, at the Art University, Emily Carr University of Art and Design, and then also at a college, Langara College, but different subjects. You know, it's crazy.
Mostly related to art.
Well, I mean, at Langara, I taught creative writing because I was also really involved with writing, and so I had quite a lot of familiarity with those skills and that knowledge set. And for some reason, it was interdisciplinary. So what I ended up doing was teaching for the classics department as well in Latin and Greek art and literature, and in Canadian studies for Quebecois separatist culture, which is really bizarre because they say, "Oh, you're from Montreal, you must know French then. How about that? We need someone," because I was always around when they needed someone to teach this course, and I understood the way that the separatists thought, people who wanted to liberate Quebec, you know, how they thought about things. And I did a lot of research, and so I taught the course, and I was good at it. So I had all these knowledge sets and skill sets, and that meant that I was always interested in something. But there's always a downside, and the downside, aside from all the preparation that you have to do, is that you know, it takes you too wide rather than deep. You know, you have to cover too much territory.
Yeah.
And eventually, I just said, "Oh," so I took early retirement and devoted myself totally to art.
So, how has doing the Latihan and affected your outer life?
Oh God, I have no idea. Well, you know, I don't mean to sound when I laugh, I don't mean to sound disrespectful. It's not that way. I'm totally devoted to that, to the Latihan. But it's that I can't say exactly how it's affected my outer life. It's you know, I mean, in one way I could say, oh, fresh disasters, you know, and so forth. So, and you're supposed to look at it and say, oh, it's a blessing, a new chance to learn things. I say, please, please, no more blessings like that.
Well,
So
isn't
right
that
now,
what we're here for? To
I
learn.
know, but
Well,
you know, it's hard. Even though one is, and I understand that I do have moments of what you might call objective devotion and contemplation, where I forget about myself and just filled with the wonder of the universe. But at the same time, you know, when I'm not in that special space, I do have self-interest. So I say, okay, now I'm, you know, I live alone. My relationships didn't work out, and you know, running out of money and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure how.
yeah.
But anyway.
Do you have any other experiences that you would like to talk about?
Um, well, if you're talking about Subud experiences, Latihan experiences, it's not necessarily. I can't think of anything right now. I'm sorry. There must have been some. Must have been some. Um, I think, it's not obvious. Like some people will see angels, suddenly coming to them or all of those kinds of things. And I don't have that. I'm not that, whatever it is. So I never had that kind of experience. But I remember I alluded to the fact I was really sick at one point, and that that happened partly because of misdiagnosis by a doctor who said I had asthma and I didn't have asthma, and so I thought, okay, geez, asthma. So I started exercising very heavily, which would have been good for asthma, but for what I had, which was cardiomyopathy, where the heart is exhausted and becomes swollen. It was the worst thing. But I was, running 5 miles a day and, doing all that kind of stuff, except that I didn't feel all vibrant,
Yeah.
And then one day I just almost collapsed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. I ended up, went to a cardiologist, and he just looked at me and said, well, you've got such and such, and you only have a 30% chance of survival and so forth. And I recommend that you have a heart transplant. Something in me just said, no, but let's just see what happens. I really loved this cardiologist, but anyway, I got sicker and sicker. I ended up in the hospital for a week, and it was strange. I was in this ward where there were mostly geriatric patients. I was only in my late 40s, so and the whole thing was, it was very strange because it didn't seem as if I was there dying. Like people were coming to visit me, like, oh my God, what? Is this going to be the last time? Lots of people came to see me. This is going to be the last time we're going to see this guy. And I survived all of that. And I started to be called the Miracle Man because I survived. I wasn't supposed to survive. Even people who were doctors said, oh my God, how do you survive? And so, yes, my doctor had a lot to do with it, but I think in some way, the Latihan must have had a lot to do with it. And it's hard because I couldn't do Latihan during that whole time period. So it's hard, and I didn't have any special experiences. And I felt bad, physically bad most of the time, but I didn't feel emotionally bad, So I was very fortunate as well because I had this arrangement. Well, what happened, I was able to go on long-term disability with my work, full-time pay for 8 months. So really, I should have not gone back to work, but I couldn't afford not to. But I had 8 months to heal up. That helped a lot. So, all of that. So I think, those sorts of things. No bright lights and whistles and so forth, but those sorts of forms of assistance I can attribute, to the Latihan in some way.
Yeah, it sounds pretty powerful experience to go through all that.
Yeah, I had a lot of medical stuff, and I don't want to turn this into that because I've had a lot of medical conditions. It's like I'm going through the alphabet. Okay, let's try this. Is there a disease that starts with the letter X? Let's see, whatever. I've gone through the whole alphabet, and yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, But yeah, whatever it is, I don't know why, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
It still doesn't stop me. I create a lot of art, although that's not always a good thing because, as I found out, you have to sell the art. Otherwise, you get another problem. That's storing it. You store it,
Well, I was looking at some of your art on your Facebook page, and some of it is quite strong. I was very impressed with some of them, not all of them, but some of them.
Only some of it? Come on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't have any more questions, but if you have anything else you would like to say or, in closing.
Yeah, probably it's like, when I go shopping and I can't think of all the stuff that I have to buy, and then I go home and I remember. So undoubtedly when we finish, I'll say, oh, I could have mentioned that or that or that. So, but right now I don't.
Okay.
Thank you for thinking of me.
Thank you for doing this interview. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. God
I'm gonna,
bless.
I'm gonna stop the recording now.
Okay.
I can find the right button. That didn't work, so
Well, let's turn it off.
I'm gonna end the interviews.
Sure.
Thank you
Okay.
for doing it.
You're welcome. Thank you.